public denials, accusations of heresy, cardinals in retreat, and shocking revelations. On the eve of the conclave, the Church is experiencing heated moments. While the world watches Rome, a crucial battle for the future of the Church unfolds behind the scenes. We are living through days that will go down in history. Stay with us. What happens today could forever change the face of the next papacy. While Rome is wrapped in the ritual silence of the vacant see in the apostolic palaces, anything but calm reigns. The eve of the conclave unfolds amidst official statements, whispered indispositions, excluded cardinals, accusations of doctrinal deviation, and scenarios closer to intrigue than to the divine. Cardinal Pietro Parolin, considered by many the favorite to succeed Pope Francis, is already under the media spotlight, not so much for his qualities, but for the alleged illness he suffered on April 30th after the General Congregation. A blood pressure problem? A sudden collapse? Inside information speaks volumes, but the Vatican flatly denies it. Matteo Bruni, the papal spokesman, calls any such news unfounded. A short, almost irritated denial that seems more like an attempt to cover up than to clarify. On the other hand, Parolin is not just any cardinal. He's the architect of the controversial pact with Communist China, the one who sacrificed the underground church on the altar of diplomacy that ended up legitimizing the repression. He's the hidden planner of Traditionis Custodes, the man who signed the suppression of the traditional liturgy. And he's also the one who celebrated the Abu Dhabi Declaration, the one that attributes religious diversity to divine will. It's not surprising that such a figure wants to avoid any sign of weakness right now, with the fisherman's ring still warm, and precisely while they try to maintain a sense of normalcy, as if the next conclave were just business as usual. The most uncomfortable voice in the Church bursts forth with prophetic and disruptive intensity. Monsignor Carlo Maria Vigano not only questions the legitimacy of the upcoming conclave, but openly declares it invalid. In his opinion, a large part of the College of Cardinals was appointed by a pontiff he considers heretical and illegitimate, and therefore the new electors would be false cardinals. His statements are not isolated. By his side is the Catholic philosopher Joseph Seifert, esteemed by John Paul II, who calls for a formal investigation before the start of the conclave, to evaluate if at least 2/3 of the cardinals should be excluded for heresy. According to Seifert, electing a pope with this college of cardinals would mean contaminating even the holiest pontificate from the very beginning, and there's more. Vigano explicitly accuses two key figures of the current Vatican power structure, Edgard Peña-Parra and Cardinal Kevin Farrell, accusing them of embezzlement, extortion, and complicity in the crimes of the late McCarrick. And while the Catholic world is divided between those who cry out in scandal and those who feign indifference, the exiled archbishop describes his personal ordeal. Away from Rome on his 75th birthday, stripped of his Vatican citizenship, his passport, and his driver's license. A treatment not even the Eastern separatists have suffered with such harshness. Even so, Vigano will not be silenced. He continues to denounce what he calls the doctrinal breakdown carried out by Bergoglio, accusing him of having transformed the Church into a fluid entity, devoid of dogma and truth, where everything is allowed except tradition. The official Vatican press insists on communicating, with almost defensive emphasis, that the conclave is not an election, nor a clash between progressives and conservatives, as some uninformed observers would have you believe. It repeats that there's nothing like a campaign, nor cardinals seeking fame or favor, and it points to the past as proof. Ratzinger, in 2005, begged them not to choose him, and compared his rise to the throne to a guillotine falling on his head. For Bergoglio himself, in 2013, there was no plan or ambition for candidacy. It was a spontaneous, very brief intervention that made him a papabile, a likely candidate for pope. But this spiritual, deep, and sober interpretation is of little interest to the media circus, which continues to distort reality with worldly parameters. The Holy See, through its official channels, tries to re-establish the truth. The general congregations serve to discuss the urgent matters of the Church, not to orchestrate palace maneuvers. In these meetings, they discuss secularization, the decrease in vocations, the necessary spiritual renewal, and they examine, with concrete statistics, also the material conditions of the Church. Cardinal Marx has highlighted a €70 million deficit. Meanwhile, the IOR has provided updates on its activity. But outside the Vatican, all of this is overlooked, because talking about the crisis of faith isn't as appealing as talking about power struggles. However, considering the emerging information, some, with a cautious but incisive tone, dare to ask if the next conclave will actually elect a pope, truly Catholic. It sounds provocative, almost like a bar joke, and yet it's the central question posed in the latest episode of Talk Faith and Reason, where there are fears of the very real risk that the election may fall on a man of power instead of a man of God. Parolin, described with sarcastic sadness as a Vatican Darth Vader, would have the support of non-Christian Jewish circles and figures linked to influences outside the faith. To make matters worse, there are pictures and comments about his actions, already papal-like wearing Pope Francis's mitre during a recent service at St. Peter's Basilica, a gesture interpreted by many as a premature self-coronation. Also, Zuppi, president of the Italian Bishops' Conference and a symbol of church globalism, is considered part of a larger plan. He's the one who officiated the wedding of a well-known Freemason years ago, and 2 years later, he was awarded the leadership of the Italian Church. In this climate of ambiguity and darkness, the traditionalist environment watches with growing apprehension the danger of a new consecration of ideology instead of doctrine. Amidst these dynamics, authoritative voices denounce a systematic attack not only on the liturgy, but on the gospel truth itself. And while global powers reorganize themselves amidst failed green economies, permanent conflicts, and digital surveillance of language, the awareness grows that the ecclesial crisis is not separate from the global one. Meanwhile, the number of cardinal electors drops to 133, with the confirmed absence of Cardinal Antonio Cañizares Lovera, promoter of the traditional Mass, and Cardinal Vinko Puljic, Archbishop Emeritus of Sarajevo, both for health reasons. What do you think? If you liked the video, comment Amen. God bless you.